Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 61, featuring Jay from j.ETH.ID, CEO of j.ETH.ID. Welcome, Jay. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing great.
Good stuff. I'm glad you were able to join us. I look forward to learning more about your interesting Web3 profile platform. So yes, welcome everyone to Web3 Warriors. I'm your host, David Karoma, go by Chrome in the metaverse. And as I mentioned, today we're going to be looking at the concept of Web3 domains and blockchain-based domains. Way back on episode 29, we talked to a creator from the team for Cortex, which is an interesting project that's also kind of looking at this space of Web3 and blockchain domains, and also working with kind of the ENS, which is the Ethereum naming service, around kind of website content management. So today we're looking at j.ETH.ID, which is a platform that's really focused on making it easier for basically Web3 natives like myself and people who have ENS profiles and perhaps others to create a Web3 profile for themselves or a Web3 website, which is when you purchase, for example, if I purchase chrome.eth.id, I'd be able to link that up with my wallet and basically go to that website and actually have a whole profile set up. So I look forward to asking Jay about, why this platform is necessary and how they're kind of filling a gap in the space and in the Web3 community. But before we do that, I just do a little diatribe on what I see happening in the kind of Web3 blockchain-based domain space, and then where, there might be opportunities for improvement or where there are current limitations. So personally, I've have a lot of experience purchasing blockchain-based domains. Generally, .eth is a very popular one. There's also .sol for the Solana community. There's also .tez for the Tezos community. And we do own all of those on the show for Web3 Warriors, and also myself as an avid NFT collector across different blockchains. So the main purpose and the main kind of function of these Web3 blockchain domains is primarily to make easy access to your wallet, right? So your wallets are generally a very long string of numbers and letters, very random, right? So if you instead say web3warriors.eth, as we do, anybody who wants to support the show now can actually send Ethereum directly to web3warriors.eth. So that's just one function, right? But beyond that, it's become pretty much a branding tool as well. So you'll see a lot of people on Twitter who have like .eth in their name, and then that they're pretty active on the Ethereum blockchain, or they're NFT collectors or creators on the Ethereum blockchain. So it has that functionality as well. But what it doesn't have right now, and I don't think any of them do really, is the ability to just go to a website right on that domain that you've purchased. So web3warriors.eth, as of right now, cannot be its own standalone website. It is a wallet address primarily. So from my understanding, j.ETH.ID, and I have seen a few other ones. I think there's eth.co. There's a couple others that are similarly trying to take your ENS or take this kind of blockchain Web3 domain idea and expand upon it and make it into what I think is a little bit more functional, a little bit more usable for your average person out there in the Web3 community. So really looking forward to getting into that with you, Jay. And also, if you have the opportunity, please do go to web3warriors.io and check out our little corner of the metaverse where we have a lot of our NFTs on display. And there's also a guest book there that you can sign to be entered into a draw to win a limited edition Avril 15 derivative wearable for the Voxels metaverse. And shout out to Voxels. They got a really cool contest going on right now, which you can find on our Twitter. If you're interested in supporting there, looking to get a Voxels plot in the metaverse. So really excited about that. So without any further ado, let's jump over to Jay and hear a little bit about your story. Maybe before we jump into the j.ETH.ID platform, I'd love to hear just, what brought you to Web3 and why are you confident that Web3 is the wave? So welcome.
Thank you. It's fantastic to be here. With Web3, what really excited me was just how hackable it was. The fact that now you had these brand new financial primitives, things that you couldn't possibly do previously. The fact that as a developer, you can manipulate and shift real value between users and between platforms. It's like having the coolest Lego blocks in the world.
Nice. So from a Lego box, you consider yourself, you're more in the dev lane, you would say? Are you a very adept coder, developer?
Yes, that's where my primary background is. I spent about 15 years in the tech industry as an engineer.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Very cool. So I guess it's that kind of background that brought you into Web3, brought you into blockchain, and like you say, just the customizability and being able to, like you say, kind of use it as your own Lego pieces and piece it together. So what inspired eth.id, I guess?
Of course. I've always had a fascination with domains and names in particular. It's curious how just a couple of characters strung together might form your personal name, and the way people relate to names and their own name, you feel this very strong bond to it. So when ENS first came out, ENS being the Ethereum name service, I immediately jumped onto it. I wanted to read all about it, all the different details, all the different features that they were providing. I think though, what my initial disappointment was the fact that if you had a .eth name, like let's say Vitalik.eth, and you type it into a browser and you hit enter, and it just breaks. And that, I think, was very counterintuitive for anyone that's familiar with domains, or the fact that this new name service called these Ethereum domains. And that to me was the biggest missing part of forming a cohesive identity structure. It's this idea that if you have a name, you want to be able to look up more information about that person, like who they are, how they relate, their different links and information. And what I really wanted to do was create a site that could provide all of that.
Wow, that's fascinating. So when you look at that limitation, I'm curious because I have a developer now here to answer the question. So why is it? Because like you said, when you hear domain, you hear .eth, you're assuming you'll be able to just go to your website. You know, mine is chromeworld.eth or web3warriors.eth. Why is that limitation in place? And is it something that the ENS team is kind of building towards? From my understanding, at some point in the future, it is supposed to redirect to a website, but I don't know. What is the limitation there? Why is that not possible?
Yes. So .eth actually stands for Ethiopia. So this is
there's that, I guess.
a three-letter TLD that the ICANN organization has reserved for every single country. And it's actually, to my understanding, I have a great relationship and much admiration of the ENS team. They're working their hardest of working with ICANN, working with the Ethiopian government. It seems like that actually had made some leeway with the Ethiopian government. Now it's really trying to get to ICANN to approve the usage of the .eth names. But so far, it's been this bureaucratic mess of trying to get through all these different layers of organization.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that there was that country reason. That makes a lot of sense, though. I guess Ethiopia has been using .eth for a while already, and I'm sure the Ethereum Foundation had to pay them some good money to be able to take that off their hands and use it in general, right? Wow, that's pretty interesting. So specifically looking at, so right now we have your eth.id website up here, and it says your website with zero coding, right? And so how does that work? What is the process for someone to pull together a kind of one-page profile connected to their ENS? Or maybe I should ask first, is it actually connected to an ENS? Like, do you require an ENS to be able to utilize this service?
Great question. So all you need to do to get started with eth.id is just your email address. You don't even need a wallet. You don't need a .eth name or any ENS. What we do is we create a new eth.id domain for you. And it's important to realize that an eth.id domain is an ENS domain as well. It's utilizing this more niche ability for ENS to be able to import in regular domains or regular DNS names. So, for example, if I had google.com, I can make google.com point to an Ethereum address.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
So what we're doing with eth.id is, because we own the base domain eth.id, we can allocate different subdomains to this base domain and essentially provide an ENS name automatically for you, so you don't have to go through the manual process of registering.
Okay.
The end result is, as a user, it's simply the easiest way to get started on Web3. You just come to eth.id with just your email address. We'll get you a Web2 website as well as a Web3 domain, everything you need.
Interesting. So when you come to the website with just your email address. You sign up, you get an ETH.ID URL essentially. It is essentially creating a subdomain under the ENS ETH.ID.
Yes, yes.
Interesting. And so ETH.ID as an ENS, how is it? Would there have to be a .eth prior to that though, right? Like I'm looking at, like I couldn't just buy ETH.Web3 Warriors, for example. Like .id was already an existing kind of URL option, I guess. I'm just trying to get to the nitty gritty of how the two are connected, because you got like the Web2 domain connecting to this Web3 domain essentially, and I'm just curious on how that works. In my head, it doesn't seem like it should, but clearly it does.
So the funny fact is .id actually stands for Indonesia.
Okay.
So it's actually a domain that was from the Indonesian TLD. Where the ETH is the name of it. So because the .id is an existing extension, it resolves as a regular website, like how like .co or .us would
so
resolve.
ETH.ID itself is not an ENS. ETH.ID is actually a standard Web2 domain.
So it's a standard Web2 domain that's been imported into ENS and now has become a Web3 or ENS domain.
Fascinating. Okay, very cool. So in theory then, I'm assuming this site will not work with .sol or .tez or any other blockchain based domain at this time, right?
Not at this time. Really the focus was on ENS, at least by trading volume. If you look at OpenSea or any other NFT trading marketplace, ENS dictates about 98.5% of trading volume.
Is it still that high? That's wild. Okay.
There are these other named services that are out there, but they pale in comparison with ENS.
Yeah. And the market around ENS is really something else. If people want to take a look at that, you can visit ens.vision, and they got a whole real kind of marketplace for the ENS holders and the traders. And yeah, there's a lot more, I would say, speculation happening in the ENS space than there is in the .sol or the .tez space for sure. So going back to the question around the website with zero coding, right? So let's say we have an ENS. So right now we've got web3warriors.eth for the podcast, for example. How does someone with an ENS benefit from your site specifically? And what do you think it has over maybe some of these other profile or ENS supporting kind of platforms?
Of course. So with ETH.ID, the core benefit is the exact same domain that works on Web 2 and Web 3, meaning that there is no extension you have to add, let's say for .co or .xyz. The wallet address that you see on any Web3 site is exactly the same as your URL. And that is the biggest benefit. Is imagine that you're on Facebook, you click on a random profile, and 90% of the time it breaks or nothing loads.
Right.
That's a situation we have today where when you see a .eth name, you have to guess whether or not this person has set up a website or a profile on the other end. And most often they haven't. One, because it's complicated. Two, it costs money to set up decentralized storage. And three, it actually requires web development. With ETH.ID, it avoids all those problems by, if you see an ETH.ID name floating out there in the wild, you're 100% guaranteed that there is a profile that's linked to that site that will load in your web browser. And for the owner, they don't have to spend any time worrying about decentralized hosting or trying to design a website. It's literally drag and drop, where anything you see, you can drag your different social media profiles, your Instagram, your YouTube channel, even your Twitch channel. You can add to your single profile that loads on your website.
Fascinating. We definitely got to get on this then. Very interesting. So how, it's just so easy. It's very it seems like it's too simple to be true. How are you handling what you, like you said, right? There's a lot of data and costs around hosting a website. Are you concerned about, you know, this scaling really quickly and then you're running into, you know, not, is there a cost, I guess, should be the better question. And if the costs are not very high, like how are you managing scaling this?
So the plan is we're actually going to be offering it as a freemium product, meaning the free version comes with an additional .me in between, and it's designed for people to try out the product, see if they like it. We haven't quite decided on the final pricing for the base domains. So the base domains is just, it would be, for example, like web3warriors.eth.id.
Yeah.
But of course, for particular services, different partnerships, we'd be happy to offer that as a service. But for we still need to determine that premium pricing for
okay. So I like talking to people still in that kind of stage, you know, as you're building, as you're kind of landing on some of these important key price points and things like that. It's a really great project. I should mention as well, I mentioned it in the tweet, but I didn't mention it yet on the show, that we met at NFT NYC, and that we had a lot of conversations. I say we, the Web3 natives, my friends that we were out there in NFT NYC chatting with, and your booth was one of the few that came up as like, that's an actual interesting use case, you know, like there were a lot of booths there that were selling PFP projects or other, you know, kind of your typical Web3 projects, I would say. And ENS is obviously ubiquitous in the space, at least those of us who are collecting NFTs on the Ethereum blockchain. And so there was a lot of interest among my friends around like, so is this just kind of an extension of an ENS, or is it offering something kind of long term? And I think what was most interesting, like you just mentioned, is the fact that if I had web3warriors.eth.id, it still functions both in the typical domain place on a browser, right? But then it also functions in the wallet. So if I punch that into the wallet, it'll sync up with my main Web3 Warriors wallet, and people would be able to actually send funds directly to that ID, right?
You got it exactly right.
That's fascinating. So how did you manage to do that? Like, because don't you have to have basically some kind of sign-in from maybe MetaMask or other, you know, third parties to recognize the eth.id domain as a wallet address? Or is it something just kind of hard-coded in, you're just using your developer know-how and made it work?
So the answer actually even simpler than that. The way we made it work was because the eth.id domain is an ENS domain, and because MetaMask and 500 plus applications already support ENS out of the box, they all have automatic support for eth.id names.
That's fascinating. So even just the idea of importing this eth.id in and making it an ENS seems fascinating. You got to know quite a bit just to make that happen, right? And then to offer that as, so if I signed up as web3warriors.eth.id, you're essentially creating a sub wallet that points to my current wallet, and it's doing all of that kind of instantaneously after registration.
Yes. All that association is done automatically after you sign up with your email.
Wow. So in theory, do you think that the other naming domains on other blockchains can support this kind of concept? Is it something you're looking at, or is an ENS kind of system just that advanced that it kind of allows for this customization where maybe .tez or .sol is not quite there yet? So
the unfortunate fact with domains is domains are only as good as the places that you can actually use them. And so what we begin to see is a what's called like a with network effects is kind of a network effects squared issue, because in order for a domain system to work, one, a lot of users have to adopt it as their personal address, and second, it requires developers to be able to integrate in that technology for users to be able to actually resolve it to whatever address that they're using. So with these other naming platforms, it runs into this deep issue where just the user base is a lot smaller, meaning that much fewer addresses that are sold that are out there. And what that means is much less developer interest in integrating in these new address systems because the user base is so low. So you run into this chicken and egg problem when you're trying to get a brand new naming service up and running. And as far as I see it, with ENS, they just have such a commandeering lead that it will be very difficult to beat.
That's fascinating. And I mean, I like to say in Web3, it's not necessarily scarcity, right? It's not that everyone has to beat ENS. It's more that, you know, take the best practices from ENS, but also look at maybe limitations of ENS. Maybe .sol figures out a way to get above that kind of issue that ENS is running into, where the domains don't go to a website, you know. And I don't know, .sol probably exists, belongs to some other country that I can't imagine right now. But, you know, maybe they can solve for certain things. And so, you know, but definitely as far as competition and market, you know, activity, there's no question ENS is way, way above. And so I imagine on the developer side as well, that has led to a lot of really good innovation and a lot more opportunities. So I just noticed I was able to plug in our website on here. As of right now, the name is available, so I'll lock that down after this episode. But everybody should check out J.ETH.ID and plug in their name and maybe see if they like the concept here. It actually plugs your name into the demo that you have here, this kind of example site. So that was kind of cool. But I was curious, what is kind of the most popular use cases that you're seeing on the website so far? And are you kind of targeting a specific audience? Obviously, NFT collectors, NFT creators. You're at a lot of these NFT events talking about it, so I imagine that's kind of the target audience. But have you seen a real kind of energetic embrace from any specific corner of the Web3 space yet?
Yes. So to be honest, the greatest use case right now is it's the pay me functionality. So let's say that you owe me $5 for dinner, and I can tell you that I just go to J.ETH.ID, and there is this module that has like pay with crypto, or pay with Venmo, or pay with PayPal. It has a text box that has the amount of money to send. And because you're coming to my website, it's already encoded with my wallet address. So from the sender's perspective, sending crypto is as easy as sending something in Venmo.
You know, it's funny, I'm up here in Canada and we don't actually get Venmo or Cash App. Like, our banking regulations are over the top here. But I definitely understand the reference, and that's very cool that you could just drop in on the site and then send cash, either fiat or crypto, on Ethereum, right? Very cool. Awesome. That's definitely a good use case for sure. And so when you're looking at target audience, would you agree that it is kind of the NFT community is your primary target audience, or anybody that's basically interested in Web3?
So I would say the primary audience is somebody who wants to actually build up who they are behind the wallet address. Right now, like, wallet addresses are very opaque. You see them all across Web3, but you have no idea who's the person behind it.
Oh, for sure.
And with an J.ETH.ID profile, it makes it really easy to change that default hexadecimal address into something that's human readable, and not only just human readable, but into a website that actually lives as your string, whichever apps that you use. And it's a very easy way for people to come in, perhaps check out your NFTs, look at your different social media links, just get a feel for who you are.
Definitely makes sense. That's cool. And do you foresee J.ETH.ID integrating at all with 3D spaces, metaverse spaces, as we like to call them? Is it an opportunity? Is it possible even? I mean, I know web-based metaverses are possible, but have you had that question at all? Have any thoughts towards developing into the metaverse?
Yes, 100%. So perhaps what's most exciting is the fact that each of those blocks or modules that you see on somebody's page, they're entirely self-contained. So you can think of them like apps that you can have on your profile. You can delete these apps, you can add new apps. And these apps are meant to be developed by both J.ETH.ID as well as other third-party developers that want to build on top of and extending the functionality of profiles. So just this past weekend, we were actually at the MIT Bitcoin Expo, where we held a hackathon where 30% of the MIT projects actually utilized J.ETH.ID as We've seen somebody made so a number of projects that made games. One person made Microsoft Paint, the Windows 95 version, where
Wow.
you can like draw pictures. And really the idea is if you could just add like a mint button right there, so you can like mint your masterpiece into NFT. But what we're seeing is with eth.id, it provides a consistent layer for developers to build Web3 applications on top of. Today, if you have a new Web3 idea and you want to build it, you got to build a front end, you got to build a back end, you got to find distribution, you got to pretty much start your own company. With eth.id, when you build an application, you can get immediate distribution across anyone that has an eth.id profile, and one of the applications might be a connection to those 3D metaverses that exists on your profile.
That's fascinating. So in some ways, you're kind of doing the old Facebook approach to like build apps for our site and customize them to eth.id, and there's no limits, right? I mean, beyond obvious, respectful limitations, but I assume you're very much kind of doing the sandbox approach where you're inviting app developers to kind of just see what they can build on it. And so a metaverse is an option. You mentioned MS Paint. That's pretty cool. So people just kind of doing communal paint jobs on there. And like you say, you could actually push a button and mint onto the blockchain. I could see a future where you set up your eth.id profile as kind of a communal art page, right? If that app existed and each person could contribute their own little thing, and then you mint it at a certain time, and maybe airdrop it to people who contributed, and who knows, maybe that's worth something one day, right? Or maybe it's not, and it's just for fun. Either way, that's really cool. Very interesting. So to your point, that's my next question, was how customizable is the website? So it sounds like if you're a developer and you really do have the coding background, it's open to a lot of development. How customizable is it from kind of your average non-coder like myself?
It's designed to be very easy to. There's going to be a form of an app store on eth.id that you can actually browse through, and perhaps you actually find that Microsoft Paint application developed by this other developer that you can add to your profile with one click. And a lot of this was actually inspired by the modding community for games. Let's say for Minecraft, where all these modders have created these wonderful extensions that you could do within the game. And what we wanted to enable with eth.id is eth.id provides that interface layer, that glue, that gets just the basic core elements down. Your Web3 identity, your wallet, as well as a very easy API. But after that, the page is meant to be your identity. It's whatever you'd like on that page, what you feel best represents you, and the things that you like to do on that page.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So I like the gaming reference. We always like gaming references on Web3 Warriors. That's what it's all about. Yeah, because modding, in the gaming space is a very interesting little niche community, you could say. And so I can see that here. I don't know why Facebook keeps popping into my head. Maybe it's a little bit similar type of profile layout that you have here, but I like the idea of a very open kind of platform of app developers to even make your whole platform that much better, right? So that's really exciting. So when you look at like what's preventing ENS from basically stealing your idea is my question. Like, what do you see a future where ENS just can do everything you're doing right now?
That's a great question. And I just want to say that like eth.id is not meant to displace ENS. Like eth.id is built on top of the ENS network,
right,
and
of
platform.
course, yeah, important
and
point.
It's very, very appreciative. I think the thing with ENS is it's serving its purpose as a fully decentralized, fully open platform that anyone can build any possible application, like including eth.id, on top of. What eth.id is presenting is it is centralized, meaning that because of the way that DNS works, necessarily the eth.id domain has to be owned by a single party, and it's being issued by the centralized agent, which is the company. But in return, what eth.id can provide is that level of simplicity where all you need is your email address, and the fact that it spins up an ENS domain, a website, all these different services. So I believe the aims, we're really talking about two different parts of the layer here, where ENS really provides that decentralized, everything's on-chain through smart contracts. Whereas for eth.id, it provides that last mile when it comes to getting to the user of building something that is very easy to use, it's very simple, but centralized.
Awesome. I can see that. Yeah, it is somewhat centralized because it's offering a very specific service, right? With the profiles, with the easy to make website. Very cool. So do you foresee a future where a platform like yours, maybe it is eth.id, is kind of replacing our Facebook profiles or even other social media sites? Like, is there a future for Web3 social media per se? And is there a kind of community angle to this eth.id, or everyone within the eth.id ecosystem kind of seeing each other and stumbling on some main timeline or something like that? Is that part of the plans?
Yes. I would describe the brilliance of Facebook during Web 2. What they noticed was, like, during the Web 2 times, they saw that people wanted a website, but not everyone knew how to code one. Facebook said, just come to us with just your email address. We'll build a site for you, and we'll connect you to other people that you know. In the Web3 era, what we're seeing is we see people want to do things with Web3. They want to mint NFTs. They see all the different fun things that there is to do, but it's still very, very complicated and very hard to approach. So for eth.id, we just simply say that just come to us with just your email address. We'll get you that Web 2 website, that Web 3 domain, everything you need to get started. So if what Facebook did was master social media, what we're doing at eth.id is mastering wallet media. Now, wallet media is a new term that I invented, but what it really harkens to is this new category of product experiences that become possible when you combine a person, a website, and their wallet. So whereas Facebook was just their person and their website, with eth.id is the person, website, and wallet trifecta that comes together and forms that brand new powerful primitive.
Very cool. I like that. Wallet media. Would you say, maybe Twitter is trying to get into that wallet media game? Do you see any other, people taking different angles at that similar umbrella term you just coined there? I'll always give you credit, by the way, if I use that going forward.
Please. It's a new concept that I'm trying to spread.
I like it. But yeah, do you think there's others doing it? Like, I know Twitter's kind of talking about getting more crypto friendly and allowing people to tip direct, on their profiles and things like that. Would that kind of apply to this new era?
So I think what's critical to really fostering wallet media and helping it spread is an open development environment. With Twitter, like, even with the very basics of tipping and some basic levels of financialization, it really doesn't provide a full API for developers to create really to the extent of their imaginations of all the things that are possible when you know the person's wallet that is coming onto your site, and the person's profiles, the owner's wallet address, and all the different interesting interactions you can do between those two.
Very cool. Yeah. So even though your platform is technically centralized, you're still very much leaning into the value of decentralized community and open access, and really wanting, more people to be involved with the building, not just your central team. So you'd say that's a distinction there.
Yes. So I would say just a very strong centralized trunk that actually forms the groundwork, but actually for the branches, it's open for all. Whether as far as you can pick whatever you'd like to put on your profile, and for developers to create really to their wallet streams, like different interactions that you can do. Like one of the most interesting applications I think we're actually developing ourselves is something called, are you familiar with Tamagotchi?
Yeah, I remember. It's nostalgic.
So we're creating something we call ETH Pets, where you can pick a a kitten or a puppy. It lives on your J.ETH.ID profile.
Okay.
And you come back each day, you can pet it.
Hey, that's creating some stickiness. I see what you're doing there.
But the key thing here is like a lot of the different mechanics will be utilizing NFTs. And to create such a game today, it'd be very difficult to go out, create your own site, find different marketing to it, and try to drive distribution. Versus what we're really trying to demonstrate here for developers is possible to create a game on eth.id that's profitable and sustainable.
Yeah, and then it's less reliant upon like quote unquote mass adoption, right? It's just kind of like it can start out as a micro community and even be somewhat profitable at a small scale. But like you say, as it kind of the network effect grows and it scales up, you can only imagine how that benefits and how, you know, from a Web3 wallet perspective, it could be very lucrative. Would ETH Pets be a situation where everyone on the platform is somehow benefiting from it, or is there still kind of like a central team that's in charge of ETH Pets that is kind of getting the revenue, if there is any revenue, from that application?
So ETH Pets is more meant as an example to the Fidelity application that of the things that we foresee. It's just we just wanted to make sure that when people visited eth.id and saw the different applications that are available, I feel just having one marquee highlight that actually has that has imputed high value, meaning that it looks nice, the pets actually look very, very cute, and they have like a lot of interaction. So we just wanted to instill that vision in developers' minds, saying that you don't have to resort to just these text boxes and these more Spartan applications. You can really go all out when it comes to creating a compelling experience.
That's really, really cool. I'm so glad you joined for this conversation. You know, it's funny because we had the debate basically while I was in New York. A few were like, well, it just seems like a little bit of a glorified ENS site. And then it's like, well, how does it really differ from, you know, one I mentioned was ETH.co. So it seems they're taking advantage of similar technology as far as their eth.co site, but the way they do it is if you put, like, I have web3warriors.eth, for example. So if I go to the site web3warriors.eth.co, it actually just brings it up as basically like an NFT profile, and it just shows your wallet basically. So it's not nearly as kind of customizable or as in-depth of what you're trying to do. But some of my friends thought what you're doing was basically what they've done, and now it's very clear that what you're doing is much more involved and more nuanced than what eth.co is doing. eth.co is cool too. To all my NFT collectors out there and artists, I would recommend checking it out. It's a cool snapshot of your NFTs. It only shows your Ethereum NFTs. It doesn't show Polygon or any other layer 2 NFTs, but it's pretty cool. So I did just mention, or just noticed that it says the eth.id domains are tradable on OpenSea. So how do you manage that? I guess, like you say, when you buy the .eth.id, it is essentially an ENS. But I've also read on your site that you don't have to worry about renewing it. So how do you do that, where you get the token ID on an ongoing basis?
Yes. So it's minted when you create a name. It's minted as an NFT that lives on OpenSea, and as soon as you create your name, you can actually see it inside your wallet, and it's up to you to trade and resell if you'd like, or keep it.
Okay. Cool. And as far as the not expiring, I always thought it was weird. That was the one thing I do think is kind of odd with ENS, and I don't think the .sol or .tezs do it where they expire. I don't know why ENS does. Well, I know why. I mean, financially, I'm sure it's lucrative. But in general, it's always struck me as a bit of an oddity. So how do you get around that, and how are they permanent?
Yes. So the direction with the subdomains for DNS names, they actually don't have a ongoing recurring costs. That allows for, but what it seems like we'll most likely do is we'll have the base free domains to be permanent, meaning that you don't have to worry about it changing. But most likely for the more premium names, we'll have some sort of cost associated, just to ensure that somebody doesn't come in and reserve all the all the premium names.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and we run into an issue where somebody's hogging all the names and they're not actually being put to good use.
Yes, yes, that is very likely to happen in this hectic, crazy NFT space of speculation and degens trying to trade and hoard as much as they can. Definitely very good thinking, probably overall, for sure. And looking forward at the evolution of this kind of industry, this space, and I think I touched on it a little bit as far as the wallet media. I love that you coined that. How do you see your site kind of evolving? So you're talking about the price point. You're talking about, little pieces that you're still kind of putting in place. You're running the circuits. You're visiting all these NFT events and things like that. What's kind of the goal number one? What is the trajectory for ETH.ID, next 6 months, 12 months into the future?
Great question. So I think if I were to summarize really the core premise of ETH.ID, it's like a very simple idea with a very simple product. The idea that you should only need your email address to get started in Web3. But underneath, it's filled with a lot of very complicated technology. So prior to ETH.ID, I was working at Dropbox and Pinterest. They also had very similar motifs. For Dropbox, it was just this idea that you put files into a folder, and they just magically appear everywhere that you have into Dropbox. For Pinterest, just looking at the application, you wouldn't believe it, but they actually have some of the world's most talented machine learning AI engineers that are developing the actual inference algorithm to figure out what images to show. But for a user, they just see pretty pictures as they're clicking across.
Yeah. Well, the algorithm is everything, and that's one thing I have to say. Twitter's got to do some work, because before Elon, I was getting stuff I actually wanted to see, and now I'm just seeing so much craziness. I don't know what happened to the algorithm. Sorry, sidebar. But yeah, so the algorithm defines a lot of what you see, right? And so you're looking to use some of that machine learning algorithm in your site as well, or how is that going to impact ETH.ID?
So it's more this idea that the best consumer companies start out with, on the surface, something that feels very simple and really easy to use. But when you look down beneath the surface, you see that there's a lot of technical engineering that was involved. So with ETH.ID, we aim to be the easiest way for anyone to get started with Ethereum, with all the interesting things on Web3. So just this past weekend, while we're at the MIT Bitcoin Expo, we launched on the MIT campus we actually had free MIT.ETH.ID domains that were for any MIT student to claim with an MIT.edu email address. We got over 200 students just signing up for that weekend. And what's most exciting was over 50% of those students, this was their very first Ethereum transaction ever.
Amazing.
And that really puts the guidelines to where we're headed next, which is trying to really be that easiest platform to get on, to spread to the next billion people for Web3.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I work on a couple DAOs, specifically the Dream Conduit DAO, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that has the sole focus of helping creators onboard into Web3 and NFTs. And it's really, I always love to hear any projects that are putting a focus on actually getting new people into the ecosystem. So kudos to you, and that's really impressive. And you mentioned earlier the fact that the MIT other projects developers, you said something like 30% of MIT developers at this Bitcoin conference, right, were building something on the ETH.ID platform. So you're clearly focused on the power of the technology and not necessarily just making big gains or making a profit in the short term. Can you speak to that a little bit? When you look at the industry as a whole, and we do see a lot of projects come along, and a lot of projects pitch to me, want to get on the show, but when you look under the surface, it just looks like you're just trying to make some sales. You just want to make some money, make a profit, but what's the real core value to the Web3 community? So just talk about the tech focus of your platform, and why did you go to MIT, and how do you see kind of the technology evolving from here, best case scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say so this is the model that I would relate to, where Web 1 was really the pipes and infrastructure, just laying the groundwork to make the internet work. Web 2, that's when Facebook and Twitter came along, is the consumer layer where they actually made Web 1 usable by your mom, by regular people.
Nice.
And it's really during Web 2 that made Web 1 make sense. I believe that Web 3 right now, we're back in that infrastructure phase. This is decentralized infrastructure where most of the discussions all around blockchains, different technologies, just really laying the groundwork for, if it's not so presumptuous to state, I believe that J.ETH.ID can be that first Web 4 company. Web 4 is defined as something that makes Web 3 make sense to regular users. Put into context, Web 1, you only had big companies like Apple, AT&T that had their .coms for websites. During Web 2, you have Squarespace, where anyone can build a website. Mm-hmm. Today with Web 3, you have these really big brands like Porsche, Gucci, that have bespoke crypto solutions. I believe Web 4 with J.ETH.ID, it will be the Squarespace of crypto, where anyone can create a new site with different interesting crypto logic as easy as drag and drop.
Wow. I will say that was the first time I've heard Web 4 mentioned in a way that did not make me cringe. So that's cool. I can see it. I would like to think you're actually advancing Web 3, but I can see that that analogy for sure. That makes sense. Making it easier for the average folks and, like you say, maybe grandparents and others to see the value in Web 3 and actually use it. And you just mentioned at MIT, more than half of the people you signed up had never even done an Ethereum transaction. So with that being an MIT Bitcoin conference, but clearly, speaking to Ethereum, speaking to the wider blockchain, or at least Ethereum blockchain, how was the reception? And in general, how is the reception as you're going to these events? Maybe specifically to the Bitcoin kind of side of things, like, do you see that those who are looking at Bitcoin, looking at maybe even CBDCs and this kind of broader conversation of blockchain tech versus cryptocurrency, how do you see that kind of impacting the Ethereum blockchain? And do you think that, being so pro Ethereum, like you running into walls at a Bitcoin event like that, or how is it received?
Oh, I'll say the MIT Bitcoin Expo is actually very open. They discuss all kinds of ideas. Like the name itself comes from just the fact that the club was formed 10 years ago. So they just celebrated their 10th anniversary. And it's more for legacy purposes. But really the conversation at the expo range everywhere from like with ordinals, with Taproot integration, Lightning Network, all the way to all the different Web3 innovations that are happening today. Okay. So just want to say, like, don't let the name throw you off. It's the MIT Bitcoin Expo is quite open for all.
And you don't think there's a much concern around like Bitcoin versus Ethereum and use cases? It's more general, like either you're pro crypto or you're not, kind of thing. We're all in the same boat.
So my personal perspective is, I believe Ethereum and really working within Web3 to be the best use case for sweat equity, meaning that you're building something new, you're building a company, you're trying to derive, create new wealth in the world. Whereas Bitcoin, I believe, is the best storage for earned equity. This is the money the wealth that you've already earned, and you want to keep in a very sovereign, decentralized way. And at least that's the way I think about things is, if you want to build something new, you want to build on Ethereum and the different Web3 technologies that are out there. If you want to keep your money safe, stick it in Bitcoin.
That's amazing, man. This has been a really great conversation. You're dropping some gems here. So sweat equity versus earned equity when looking at Ethereum versus Bitcoin. That's awesome, man. That's really great for the audience. I appreciate that. Yeah, really cool. So I was wondering, just one last question on this whole social media or wallet media, as you call it. Something that I'm very concerned about, and I think it's still up in the air to be determined, looking at that evolution to maybe Web3 to Web4 even, which I don't like to use, but in your context, I can see where you're coming from. Do you think that the data conversation is going in the right direction or the wrong direction? You know, because I think when we look at Web 2, we look at a lot of these legacy social media sites, they have unapologetically just kind of taken our data and done whatever they wanted, you know, to the highest degree of even basically mental manipulation to make you stay on their apps and make you buy their ads and click on their ads and things like that. I see it as manipulation anyway. Others may disagree. But I just think that that question of data sovereignty, that question of ethics around your data, around how you are handling, you know, the information you're getting from your customers and users. Do you think that as we evolve, well, let's say into Web3 first, are these things going to change? Do you think that that should be a requirement of Web3 entities to really do away with some of those data practices, or how do you see it evolving?
Yes, yes. I believe that we're in due time for a big change. I believe the current giants were more as an unintended consequence of the internet actually not having a native currency or native digital method of transferring value. And because it didn't have that, the internet turned to the one business model that could profit, which was advertising. And with advertising, you needed these bigger and bigger firms to exist, to get that economies of scale. Hence why like all the big internet giants today with Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, they're all built as advertising networks.
Right.
With the advent of Web3, with having that digital scarcity, I sincerely believe that this enables an entire class of business models that doesn't depend on user data, that doesn't depend on actually trying to sell things to users. And I believe that to be for the better. Is it will allow for future companies to have much more to be much more protective of privacy for users.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's a good excuse for sure that the advertising was the main way to get revenue. Within that context, I think that some have used data better than others, right? Like whether between Apple and Facebook or even Apple and Google, there's a big difference in how data is used and how it's kind of presented to the user. So yeah, I agree for sure. As we have these new monetization avenues, hopefully, you know, data will be more ethically handled and not siphoned for as maximum profit, you know. Well, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation. I don't think we have any questions from the live stream. Final question I always like to ask our guests as we wind down. If there are any questions in the live stream, feel free to ask them now before we end the convo. How are you dealing with the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, as we know does exist out there in the regular world when talking about blockchain, when talking about Web3, and people think, you know, we're just trying to spam them or whatever the case may be. You know, how are you, or are you even trying to convince those who have been, you know, listening to the FUD, and how are you kind of handling those conversations when trying to convince people of this new awesome Web3 profile?
Yeah, that's a great question, and certainly during my conversations, I have absolutely felt that from conferences of people that were nervous, that were afraid to make their first step into Web3. And I believe this is really a stage where it's really in need of building up that fundamental layer of trust. And really what J.ETH.ID aims to be is that stable layer that you can look at and be able to know that you will be protected on the platform and is a trustworthy name that's really designed to help you make those first steps. It's going to try to do its best to protect you against scams, any malicious links, or any malicious actors that might be out there. And that's what I believe the industry needs, is just a company, a party that is really trying to gently guide users into this new space, while providing that protective barrier, at least until users get more adept and more aware of the things that are out there.
Cool. So you really lean into, I guess, the security advantages of doing it this way. being very clear about, yeah, there are some, issues in certain corners of the industry, but if you know best practices and you're handling your wallet properly, then, you'll be safe. Don't click any crazy links. That's the PSA. Well, thank you so much. It's been really, really great. And I think, yeah, talking about that layer of trust is a really important angle as well. I was really inspired by what you said about the MIT students and the onboarding work that you're doing. As I mentioned, the Dream Conduit, 501c3 based in the States. Maybe we can find a way to work together. I would love to reach out and see how we can do that, because I think these profile websites are very powerful, especially as the Web3 space grows and scales up. So I will be in touch, and I'll definitely be following up. And I think you dropped a lot of really great knowledge for people who are Web3 natives like us, or others who maybe are just learning about Web3 and want to understand, what's the value of this. You just mentioned that the three pieces of the wallet media again, right? It was the person, the website, and the wallet.
You got it.
Awesome. Bringing it all together, streamlining it, making it easy for everyone. Well, I appreciate you, Jay. Is there any final thoughts you want to add before we wrap up here?
I just want to thank you and your listeners. It's been a wonderful time. Really just getting down into the details and roots of Web3.
That's it. Roots of Web3. Appreciate you, Jay. We'll be in touch. I will definitely send over the podcast once it's fully live on the podcast networks. And yeah, lots of really great information here. Everybody check out eth.id to get your free version of the domain and link up your wallet and try to create a little Web3 profile for yourself. And we'll be doing that shortly after this episode. Thank you, everyone who tuned in on the live chat. We appreciate you. And until next week, we will catch you in the metaverse. Peace out, everyone.